So today I'll be showing you all of my investigations and experiments with these Pebeo glass paints. In my previous glass painting video I showed you the best way that I'd found to use the outliner and the glass paint on a flat surface. So in this video I'm looking at diluting the paint and how to use the diluted paint. I'm also looking at using the outliner on curved glass and applying the paint to curved glass, and also making a transfer image. So do use the timestamps or chapters in the video description to jump around to whichever part you would like to watch if you need to. So I did all these experiments over the course of about 2 months, and I was dipping in and out of it as I went. Some of it went really well and some of it didn't go so well. Now I've only got these 4 colours of paint, of the glass paint. I've got an outliner, a spare outliner and some thinner. So using the thinner to dilute the glass paint. So in my previous video I didn't realise that you needed a glass thinner. I found that out halfway through my experiments, but this time I kind of wanted to find out how much thinner to paint I needed to use. So I made myself up a grid on a flat piece of glass. I tried making another one today and it was really gloopy, and I had actually forgotten how best to use the outliner. It'd been so long since I last did it, so I actually had to go back and watch my video to remind myself how to do the outlines. But anyway, so what I thought I'd do was I thought I'd try to measure out the best concentration of paint and thinner using my pipettes. So each pipette holds 3 ml of liquid. So I initially put 3 ml of the glass paint thinner into my palette. I know it's a rather rustic palette, but it works. And then I went to put some glass paint in the pipette, and the issue was that it was so thick in the pipette I couldn't actually see how much I had, because when I squeezed some out it still stuck to the inside of the pipette. So I think I added about 1 ml of the glass paint to the 3 ml of the thinner, and I mixed it very, very well. But when I used it, it was very thin, almost like water. So I thought, okay, I need to add a bit more paint. So I added roughly 1 ml again. This was very difficult to do because I couldn't really see through the pipette, and it still felt very watery. So for the third section I added another ml, so it was 3 parts paint and 3 parts thinner. And it did feel a lot thicker, and it did feel like it had a good consistency whilst maintaining some translucency. Translucency? Is that even a word? The problem with using these paints neat, some of the paints are not very transparent. The yellow happens to be most transparent, but this red one is very, very dark. So in the 4th section I added another ml, so it was 4 parts paint, 3 parts thinner. It was very thick, but it was still quite translucent. So I think ideally you do need to have more paint to thinner ratio. And if you're doing some glass painting yourself, you might want to experiment to get the right colours with the swatching grid like this before you start. I actually think this is really worth doing because you can really see how the colours are going to look once they're dry, and depending on the project that you're doing you might actually want different shades of colour. With hindsight, I think you might be better off using those little kind of measuring cups, the sort that you get in medicine bottles, to just, measure out the millimetres, because I think that would make much more sense than using the pipette. And you could still use the pipette to transfer it into the little measuring cups. Unfortunately, I didn't have any measuring cups. Also, the pipettes were really hard to clean as well because that paint gets right up in there. So unfortunately my experiments with this diluting didn't really go to plan. They weren't as conclusive as I'd really hoped, but do experiment and make sure that you've got more paint and thinner. You can add paint after if it's too thin, and do make yourself a little swatching grid, because I really think that that is the best way to get the right colour and the right consistency for your own project. So what I decided to do was I wanted to decorate this bottle with different shades of paint. So I put some of the outliner on the glass. And once it was dry, I tidied it up a little bit with my craft knife because I was still a bit wobbly with my hands. I diluted some blue with just a few drops of thinner and applied it to the shapes. Now, if you're doing this yourself, do ensure that there's no bubbles, and do make sure that you lift your work from time to time to ensure that you've just painted over the black lines, because it can separate. So then I added 6 or 7 more drops of thinner to my paint. I gave it a good mix. Try not to mix it up and whisk it because you'll get lots of air bubbles appear, but just gently mixing seems to do the trick. So if you're doing a project similar to this or any other glass painting, even on a flat surface, don't paint in an adjacent section because you're going to run the risk of the paints bleeding through onto each other. This happens because you do need to paint right up to the black line, and if you then paint right up to the black line on the other side as well, if they touch, they will spread. Even though I diluted this section, it really didn't look that much lighter to me than the previous section, so I added a few more drops of thinner. And I think this is really what you've got to do. You've got to have a play until you can find the right colour for you. But yeah, again, I didn't really notice much difference, so I added even more thinner. I left it to dry, and because the bottle was slightly curved, annoyingly, it bled off the top of the bottle. But when I dried it, I could see that the blues were slightly lighter than each other. So I went on to fill in the other empty sections, and at this point I had decided that when I was mixing up the paint and the thinner, if I mixed them up in these spare little bottles, then I could seal them up and come back to them the next day, and I wasn't going to keep wasting paint. Yeah, if you don't have any of these leftover Winsor & Newton drawing ink bottles, I do recommend those tiny little pots of jam that you get when you go to a cafe. If you save those, rinse them out, and you can use those to seal up and store your glass paint in the different dilutions. Dilutions? Is that even a word? Forgive me, I've not been well recently and my words are just made up at this point, I think. Anyway, I digress. So to cut a long story short, I really wasn't happy. So I ripped it all off and I started again, and this time I drew my lines on the flat glass and then peeled them off and reapplied them to the bottle. So this meant I could position the lines exactly where I wanted them to be, and I could chop off those awful blobs I kept getting. As mentioned, I hadn't been well and I was finding that my hands were very shaky, so I decided that this drawing out and peeling off was the best thing that I could do. Anyway, once that was done, I mixed up some diluted paint in the empty ink bottles and reapplied the paint. Much happier with this result. I used a diluted green and a diluted blue, and each time I was adding a few extra drops of the thinner for each of the sections that I was painting. But yeah, I was really happy with the end result of this vase. It was exactly what I was hoping for, and the colours were lovely. So I tried using the outliner on a curved surface rather than a flat surface, and my results were pretty awful actually. They were wobbly and they were bobbly. I do think I was still having a little bit of the shakes, but not so bad that, I couldn't achieve some straight lines. I think the reason it was so hard to do this on the curved bottle was because In my previous video, I'd stressed how important it is to have your arm rested and supported on the surface. And because these glass bottles were, about 3 inches, 2.5 inches off the table, I was having to hold my arm up, so I had nothing supporting my arm. So I think what I'm going to do is keep my eyes out for a chunky piece of foam or a box which will be the same height as the bottle, so that my arm is fully supported as I'm drawing, because I think that was the real problem that I had. Because it's very different when you're working on a flat piece of glass on your desk and you've got your arm fully supported, and when you're raising it up, it's just, you can't keep that steady arm. So yeah, I'm definitely going to look out for something that I can use to elevate my arm, to rest it on, and I will be having another try. So once it was dry, I did get my craft knife out to start chopping off all the blobs. If you'd like some detailed instruction on this, do go and check out my first glass painting video, but do be very careful because it's very easy to slip off the bottle. You're not working on a flat surface, and if you're pointing the knife towards you on a curve, just be very careful. I do think that if I had a bit of foam with a bevel to kind of hold the glass steady, that would be a really good idea as well. Something to really properly support your glass as you're working on it. I'm going to keep my eyes peeled for something, and in the next video I will hopefully have these things in place. So the next step was to see how easy it was going to be to apply the paint into these sections. I used the same method that I would use on a flat surface, but as expected, the paint started moving to the edges with gravity, and I didn't know how to stop that, to be quite honest with you. So I let these sections dry and I tried with the yellow, and this is the one colour that you can use neat and it's still quite translucent of the 4 that I've got. The pooling in both the colours gave a very rippled effect, so I tried using less colour. Nope, it was still pooling. So over the course of the next few days, because I had to keep working on this in small sections, because if I turned the bottle around the paint was just going to dribble off, so I could only work on 1 or 2 sections at a time, let them dry, turn the bottle 1 or 2 sections at a time. But you can see on all of these it was still pooling. I don't know how to stop that, I'm really sorry. I tried using neat paint, I tried using diluted paint, nothing worked. The more diluted the paint was, the runnier it became. So yeah, I don't know, can you get a thickener for these paints? That would be interesting to know, because if you can get something that would thicken them up a bit, then you could make them translucent and then thicken up the paint. If you've heard of anything, do let me know, or if you have experience of this, do let me know, because it will not only help me, it will help other people as well. I also experienced a few runs and overspills, so it was a little bit disappointing, but I carried on regardless because that's what I do. But in conclusion, the paint definitely needs to be a bit thicker. I don't know whether I should mix up the paint, leave it to one side and let some of it evaporate a bit. I don't know, but it's something to investigate, that's for sure. So I realised at this point, if I was going to draw a design on a bottle, the paint was just going to run, so it wasn't going to be great. Because in the past I've peeled off the outliner and then reapplied it, I wondered if I could do that with a full image. So I did a couple of really basic drawings on the glass with the outliner, let that dry, and then I painted them in. Let it dry, and then attempted to peel them off. Now these are very basic images, but I wasn't going to do something really elaborate and then ruin it, so I just thought I'd do something simple. A few tips if you're trying this method of peeling off your image: go slowly. If you feel any resistance at all, don't push it, because it will tear, particularly on the thinned paint. The outliner's pretty good and pretty sturdy, but the thin layers of regular glass paint are not quite as strong. Don't pull it, you don't want to stretch it, so go really slowly, just teasing it off. Once I'd got them off, I tried to apply them to the glass. That was fairly straightforward, but you want to be very careful not to get any air bubbles, so put it down at one side and then smooth it down. But because the image is flat and the glass is curved, you might get a few crinkles. I didn't get it so much on the bottle because the image was going nice and flat on a rounded surface. But with the glass, because it was tapering at the bottom, I did get a couple of little wrinkles. I was able to kind of push them down with my thumb, but it's just worth bearing in mind. So my last experiment was painting directly onto a curved glass. Now I've seen lots of lovely little floral designs on glasses that other people have done, and I thought, okay, let's give it a go. It didn't go well. But in theory, with a lot of practice, it might work. To start with, my thinned paint just ran away with itself. So my first experiment was to have these kind of grassy branches and dab some little dots of paint on as flowers. I didn't get any runs. But it was a pretty basic design and I wanted to do something better. So I just had a little bit of paint on the paintbrush. I dabbed it on to make some little dots of flowers. It wasn't running. Less paint, no runs. But it was such a basic design that I thought, no, come on, really? Yeah, it was just disappointing. It's not great, is it? So I thought I'd try painting some nice flowers directly onto the glass. Yeah, I came to realise that I need to practice painting flowers first. Painting on the glass is very, very different from painting on paper. It's got no resistance. Paper has got a drag that kind of stops the brush a little bit. The glass is so smooth and shiny, the paintbrush just kind of doesn't behave in the same way. So my next step is to learn how to paint some simple flowers on paper, and then I can revisit this one trying to create them on glass. I am not ready to give up on the glass painting just yet, and there are a few more things that I'd like to try. I'm happy enough with geometric patterns, but I would really love to make some florals. So I'm sorry that the experiments in this video have been a bit of failure, but I have learned a few things which I hope that you can use on your future project as well. Definitely have something to support your arm if you're doing something on a glass that's raised off your desk. Definitely try and find something to support the bottle. If you want to precisely measure out your paint, try getting hold of some little measuring cups. Do make yourself up a little transfer grid so that you can see what colours you're creating. Do get yourself some little glass bottles that you can store the diluted paints in so that you're not having to keep wasting your paint. If you need any advice on applying the outliner or baking in the oven, do check out part 1 of my video. I'll put the link in the video description for that as well. And I really hope, even though it feels like it's a bit of a disaster video, that you've managed to gain something out of it. But if you've got any tips to help either me or anyone else that's watching this video on their way, do pop them in the comments below, because I've seen some amazing work with glass paint. I would just like to be able to master a little corner of it. I do definitely think it would be wonderful if I could create a couple of nice decorated wine glasses. So I will be back, but it will be sometime in the new year, and I'll try not to leave it so long for the next video. I had actually forgotten where I put my glass paints, so that's why this one took so long. And yeah, do subscribe if you'd like to follow my creative journey. I post a variety of art and craft videos, and it would be lovely to have you along for the journey.